Another growing issue during both Jackson and Van Buren's presidency was the Texas independence movement. So, Texas had gone from being under Spanish rule to now under Mexico's control after Mexico gained their independence from Spain. And Mexico granted large tracts of land to Stephen A. Austin to bring in American families. Over 300 American families would be brought in, but there were stipulations under this. A, the families were supposed to all be Roman Catholic, and they were supposed to assimilate and become part of Mexico. But these stipulations were largely ignored, and more American immigrants began to move into Texas. And as they did, a lot of these now Texans resented Mexican rule and the widespread use of Mexican soldiers. And so by 1835, there were over 30,000 Americans now living in Texas. This included famous figures like Davy Crockett and Jim Bowie and Sam Houston, who had been an ex-governor from Tennessee. And these tensions continued to mount between Texas and Mexico. And one of the growing issues was actually slavery. Mexico had emancipated their slaves in 1830 and prohibited the importation of slaves into Texas, and Texas pretty much ignored those restrictions. And so, under these growing tensions, Stephen A. Austin goes to Mexico to negotiate with Mexico over these issues, and instead, Santa Anna puts him in jail for 8 months. And in 1835, Santa Anna basically wipes out all local rights in Texas and raises an army to suppress this growing Texas resentment. And so that's going to lead to Texas independence movement. So Texas declares independence in 1836. Sam Houston was named commander-in-chief, and early on things don't go well for Texas. You have the famous Battle of the Alamo, where 6,000 Mexican troops under Santa Anna defeat 200 Texans. Then the Battle of Goliad, where 400 Texans surrender and are butchered by Mexican troops. And these two early losses and massacres really become rallying cries for Texas. And at the famous Battle of San Jacinto, Sam Houston and 900 men launch a surprise attack and are able to defeat Mexico. They capture Santa Anna, and ultimately, Texas wins their independence. Mexican troops are withdrawn from Texas. The border is created at the Rio Grande River, and Andrew Jackson immediately recognizes Texas as an independent republic. And this begins a growing push to annex Texas into the United States. But there were issues, and one of the growing issues that we're going to talk about more in the coming weeks was the issue of slavery. A lot of Northerners opposed annexing Texas because they didn't want slavery spreading further in the South. So the final thing we'll talk about here is the election of 1840. So we now had two political parties kind of firmly established. You had the Democrats, who nominate Martin Van Buren for re-election, and the Whig Party, which we talked about prior, that had been kind of born as an anti-Jackson party. And they nominate William Henry Harrison. William Henry Harrison had been a war hero. He claimed to be from humble origins, but in reality he wasn't. But they kind of used that portrayal to their advantage and ran this campaign built around the famous log cabins and hard cider. And so they would have these kind of huge campaigns where they would build makeshift log cabin props, and they would pass out hard cider to voters to try to win them over and portray him as kind of this man of the common people. And it worked. Harrison barely wins, but he does win the presidency. He would choose John Tyler as his vice president, and Harrison only serves 4 weeks as president. He's going to die 4 weeks into um, his presidency from pneumonia. And so his vice president, John Tyler, will take over. But a couple major changes that we see over this age of Jackson. First off, the rise of the populist democratic style, meaning that appeal to the common man. Both sides tried to appeal to the common man to win over voters. And the final big change that we see in this age of Jackson is the rise of a two-party system. You had the Democrats, represented by Andrew Jackson, who favored individual rights and states' rights, and then the growth of the Whig Party, which favored the national bank and protective tariffs and public schools and internal improvements and moral reforms like prohibition and abolition. And both sides tried to appeal to the common man.